You are listening to Tap, and today I'm very excited to be speaking with a colleague from far away, Deborah Muffet. Welcome to Therapeutic Astrology Podcast.
Thank you so much, Manna. I am delighted to be here. Thank you for your invitation.
You're so welcome. You are an astrologer, teacher, and life guide. Those are the words that you have to describe what you're doing, just in short. But if you can you say something a little bit longer about what it is you're doing?
One of the reasons that you and I have connected, I think, and that we've clicked and you found me on the other side of the world,
Yeah.
is that my approach to astrology is very psychologically informed. So part of my
Yes.
work is, and how I've developed it over the decades that I've been practicing, is to use a reading as a tool of self-discovery, as a tool of personal unveiling, as an opportunity to help someone discover more about their psychological patterns, their life patterns, and to provide some sense of larger meaning to these patterns and to the events that express these patterns. So I work with clients, and since the pandemic, I only work with clients online. I don't actually work with clients face to face
Okay.
anymore. So this has become my modus operandi. And I work with clients all over, not just Australia, but also I have some international clients and have had for some time, especially in the States, but some in the UK and around, maybe now in Denmark.
Yeah.
Um, and I also teach. So, having practiced astrology professionally for nearly 30 years, probably around the time of my second Saturn return, if that's a phrase that resonates with some of your listeners, I determined upon doing something more substantial with it. So I built quite a significant website, wrote a lot of in-depth blog pieces and articles that were connecting a larger metaphysical worldview, psychological realities with astrology as a tool, particularly the archetypal worldview, because that's something that informed my practice of astrology very much since I encountered it maybe about 15 years ago at first. And that eventually led to an invitation by Nature Care College, which is the oldest natural therapies college in Australia. Would I be interested in designing an online teaching program, a one-year professional certificate in the kind of astrology that I practice, basically? So me and my Scorpio ways, as you've already suggested to me, had to do this to the nth degree, had to do this in great depth, incorporating everything that I had learned from psychological trainings and modalities, as well as astrological trainings and modalities. But I also designed it to be a self-discovery experience for my students. So as they are progressing through the learning of astrology, through an engagement with all the fundamentals and then, more sophisticated subjects as we go along, them learning about themselves, I invite as the tool or the process by which they're going to learn about astrology. And you're an astrologer, you know very well that it's the most profound learning, I think, when you're learning something through your own chart, through your own transits. So that's how it developed. And whew, it was very much a Saturn journey.
Uh, I can
It really
I
was.
can imagine it must
Uh,
have taken a lot, but what an opportunity as well, right? That's a good Scorpio attraction you made with that someone
mm,
actually
mm.
asked you to do this.
And I tell you what, also gives meaning to one's Saturn return. This was my second Saturn return. So I've been to this rodeo before. And I've learned the importance of giving yourself a project, really, giving yourself something to really, get your teeth into that you feel is going to be significant, hard one, challenging, but allowing you to very slowly, over time, with a great deal of work, give you a platform that will go forward for the next phase of your Saturn cycle. So it was a conscious choice. I knew it would be super hard. But I'm now into teaching my third year, and it's been incredibly rewarding. Just the connection with the students has been, so uplifting. And I've got over all the hard work side of it, so I'm in recovery.
You're in recovery from all of that. Oh, yeah. Wow, but that is so great. That is, yeah, Saturn, the great master, now passing on what you've learned and experienced. I mean, it is such a wonderful combination that you're talking about, because it's really sending us on not just a technical journey, but a personal journey, right, with this material. And just want to say to the listeners, today we're going to talk about Uranus and Jupiter meeting in the sky and what the significance of that. But I just wanted, before we dive into it, I just wondered if you had a comment on, because your website is called what is it called? Heartsplan.com. Why is it called that? I feel there must be something very important about the concept of the plan of the heart.
It's probably a combination of things. Synchronicity, the way that you're fed certain influences from different sources over time. So I can't put it down to one thing. I do know that I was very informed with my background and interest in an archetypal worldview at the Platonic concept of being born with the imprint of a pattern that's personal to you, that will express itself throughout your life, that you have an opportunity and the requirement really to develop and grow. So it's something about that pattern that you're given at birth that Plato was convinced was the case. And eventually, after a long, long time with that concept, I encountered back in the 90s now, James Hillman's book, The Soul's Code, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah.
And I know he was very influenced, of course, by the Plato concept, and the notion that we are born with some sort of deeply personal, yet destined imprint, whether you understand that imprint as being archetypal in nature and therefore some sort of a system of patterns, which for we as astrologers can be read through the birth chart, or whether even more historically you apply concepts that were mythological, which of course astrology does also, particularly with the classical planets, the sun and the moon, and then out towards Saturn. There's thousands of years of extraordinary myths that inform the meaning of these planets for us. So when you get to then Jung, and Jung's notion of psychological complexes as being informed by these archetypes as almost like the gods and the goddesses at the core of each psychological concept, and the psyche being made of so many combinations of these concepts. I think I was very, very ripe for the discovery that the heart is considered by the ancient Egyptians to be the holder of the soul on a physiological level. So the connection, of course, the metaphor of the heart equating to the soul, I think, is extremely old. And the Egyptians are certainly not the only source of that idea. So all of these things were brewing in me for a very long time. And then quite a few years ago, I had a client, a long-term client, who is a psychologist, and very bright lady, PhD, super smart, and said to me, you know, I think that one astrology session is actually worth 10 of people coming to see me. It's almost like you're getting this map of your heart's plan for you. And as soon as she said that, all these different sources just fell into place. And I knew that that's the business I'm in. I'm actually helping people discover their heart's plan for them, their heart's calling, which does not in any way preclude the notion that there's a lot of work and self-discovery to be done and personal growth. But there is this unique, beautiful, awesome pattern that's deeply personal for each person. And the work that I do is to help people to uncover that, to unveil that, to recognize that in themselves, and to become more acquainted with both the extraordinary potential of that and the challenges of that. And in terms of the potential, that they have their whole lives to work toward the development of that, as you know, with Jung's concept of individuation. This is the reason that we're here. And that the rest of us in the collective, we're all banking on you doing that. Yeah, the collective's banking on me doing that. Nobody can actually be me the way that I can be me and what I have
Yeah.
to offer to the collective. Does that make sense? It's a
Yeah,
long explanation.
yes, and I'm partially impressed by the content and partially impressed by your ability to articulate it. So, but that's what many years under the belt will do to you, I assume. But that's just no, that's pretty cool. Well said. I feel like saying well said. Oh,
Thank you,
yeah,
Hannah. Thank you so
yeah.
much.
But it's so true that sometimes, these ideas, they come from all over, and different traditions have different pieces of the truth in general. And also this idea around that we are born with a certain pattern. And then you say, some people say, did you say that the Egyptians saw the heart as the soul? Yeah. And
Mm,
so the pattern is in the soul, in the heart, somewhere
mm,
good,
mm,
somewhere good inside you. And I feel when you talk about individuation, you've actually led us right into our topic for today. Don't you feel that? Because,
Tell me more. Tell me
right?
more.
Because yeah, because I'm thinking about Uranus is about
Mm,
individuation, and what you said, that if people are not really living what they're here, their heart's plan, their their soul contract, it has many names. if
mm,
if you're not really living that, then we are letting down the whole earth. I mean, and what I could hope for is that this conjunction is gonna vibrate in such a way that it's possible for us to live more authentically. But that's
that's a
even,
beautiful phrase.
but I feel it's,
More authentic.
yeah, authentically, but I also feel it's understated. It's like it's bigger than that, because it's Jupiter and it's Uranus and it's huge. Yeah. Okay. So what do you think about this
Yes.
conjunction coming up on April 20th or April 21st, depending on where you are in the world?
Well, I couldn't agree more. I loved the way that you used the description of the impulse of Uranus through us psychologically, socially, through our lives, our life events, our personal unfolding, that is at the core of it. Its push is to help us give birth to something new and to help us give birth to ourselves, really. And what I've found really fascinating, given the time in our historical development that I'm practicing astrology, that so many of the clients that I see were born between 1940 and toward the end of that century, at which time, coincidentally, Uranus and Chiron were doing this dance opposite each other for so many of these, populations and generations. So for me, it's been very interesting, and this is something that's in my chart also, but and it's in the chart of many. It no longer is, by the way. So if you're a very young listener, this will not be part of your journey. But apparently, for so many of us, this impulse toward becoming who we can be, that's fresh and new and different to anything that's been before, is demanding of us that we resolve some sort of wound, that we contend with a wound that incurs, whether it's something really simple like breaking free, being liberated, doing what we have come here to do, inevitably means that we have to separate out from the past or those who we are attached to that we no longer please, or there's some sort of wounding there that needs to be negotiated. So I come at Uranus quite often from that perspective. I also find it delightful the way that its cycle around the sun and around our birth charts is approximately the same period of time as the average old age, 84 years, I think,
That's the
approximately
whole
anyway.
Uranus cycle.
So there's some, yeah, deeply personal for human beings in this impulse. And then, of course, we could go into, from my archetypal background, the mythology around Prometheus and the fire stealing that's connected to this planet and its ancient roots, the separation of fire, the granting of it to humans rather than it being in the sole hands of the gods. So humans have more opportunity to develop their own lives, make their own choices, their own destiny. They're empowered more to do this, which, by the way, if you get right into all the mythology, then takes you to the story of Pandora's box and takes you to the story of Prometheus being torn to pieces by the eagle on a mountain because he's punished for this gift that he gave to human beings. So there's this, even historically, there's this extraordinary drive to do this, yet there's this price that has to be paid. And I feel that for all of us born in that period of time, all these generations, there's something deeply personal about that. But here, next week, to be exact, this is different. This is somehow a blessing. This is somehow redemptive. This is somehow more of an open opportunity to take advantage of personal growth, change, upliftment, newness, in a way that is no longer attached to this, lengthy saga that I've just described, that I think Uranus often comes entangled with. Anyway, I'll hand over to you to see what you think about that.
I don't need to say anything because you're just rolling. Oh man, that is so good. I didn't even think about that in this context, but of course it is something very visible when we look at in charts, like you say, most of the clients that we have and our own charts, that Uranus was opposing Chiron there. And are you thinking that then that has an effect on how we're going to live out the energy that's coming up now, because it's in our chart?
That's an interesting concept. If I reflect on the notion of Jupiter and Uranus together, happens every 13 or 14 years. This time it's in Taurus, as you say, round about 22
Yep.
degrees or something like that, isn't it? One would, particularly from the archetypal perspective, associate with this an enormously uplifted energy. Richard Tarnas, who is Professor Richard Tarnas, to be exact, who is the academic who wrote Cosmos and Psyche, which I urge everybody to explore. He describes this combination as thank the Lord and woohoo, very positive, joyous, sort of change that comes that's happy, that's successful. But in this conversation we're having, when we're exploring for us this association that we have with Uranus, it's interesting because when I first started to write about Jupiter and Uranus coming together, which was about September last year, they were getting close, and then there was a retrograde, and then there was some quite difficult astrological patterns towards the latter part of last year. And I felt in the contemplation of it and the writing about it, there's an introduction that's happening at this time, but there's work to do. And the last few months of last year involved some sort of hard yakka that was necessary to the unleashment of this opportunity. Then all these planets went crazy forward in January this year, as you know. And here we've arrived at finally the exact moment where they come together. And I would like to just also say that for me, with the kind of astrology that I practice, I'm very, very interested when larger combinations, transits get triggered by the quicker ones. So in looking forward, the Sun and Venus trigger this part of the sky in about mid-May. So for me, I will also be looking right through, not just next week, but certainly right through until mid-May. And I think in looking at this earlier on today, perhaps it was the end of June or early July that Mars arrives at the same point. So I don't think it's just down to next week. I think there's this period of time where stuff's going to come up and opportunities shall arise that have the potential to be exciting, new, deeply meaningful, with Jupiter, the knight on a holy quest, on a crusade, seeking meaning, being part of the equation. It could be a personal thing where there's new insights, deep realizations that are very liberating, something happy or fortunate or redemptive after a lot of suffering that arises, some sort of quantum leap forward, perhaps. A eureka moment that is just so Uranian, isn't it? Just suddenly arising from nowhere, this realization, this answer that you've been seeking. And a new belief that what you really want can happen. So there are all these possibilities around this being a favorable time for new beginnings and awakenings and big change that's very positive in nature. Yet the conversation that we're having now is very interesting because I hadn't thought this before to the degree that I do in this conversation with you now. To what extent do those of us with this hard work around Uranus feel comfortable with this, feel happy to walk through that door, recognize it for what it is?
Right. Because we're used to there's a pain attached to it.
Yeah, quite possibly. I
Perhaps.
mean, there's always, from an archetypal perspective, there's always a presentation of any combination of planets or any individual planet on a potential that is a spectrum. And what I've just described for Jupiter and Uranus is the highly integrated, positive, uplifting, life-enhancing end of the spectrum. There is also the potential to be very inflated, I would suspect, with this kind of energy. If you're the kind of person who is a gambler, an inherent risk taker, who isn't particularly grounded about recognizing the risk in your circumstance, then perhaps there is a different issue in play. But I think for the majority of us who do feel the pain around this and have to navigate the pain around this, will we struggle to accept, look the gift horse in the mouth? I'm not sure. What do you feel?
I didn't know that last phrase.
That's an English
What did you
metaphor.
say?
Maybe that doesn't translate.
Maybe look what in the face?
Look the gift horse in the mouth. It means that
Okay.
You just don't see the gift that's in it, in the opportunity of it. You
Ah,
don't
right.
recognize
Okay,
it.
okay,
Pass it up.
okay. See, I have Chiron in Gemini and opposing a lot of things in Sagittarius. But
Mm.
anyway, I don't. That's that's where I have my questions, and that's where I allow myself to ask when I don't know, and because there are so many social restrictions on that, right? Like, oh, I know that, just move on, right? But now I'm like, I want to know, even though it's awkward. So thank you for that. But yeah, it's really inspiring, and I love how things also develop in a conversation where we just think about it from a slightly different perspective. Because, of course, there's no clear answers here. It's just ideas around it.
Mm.
And like you said, it's of course part of a larger cycle that's gonna continue, and that's part of everything that's gone before. The the special thing is also that it's a new cycle starting in Taurus.
Yes.
So there's yeah, right. So there's something about the apparent, the external, the material side
Mm.
that
Mm. Mm.
comes together with a higher mind.
Mm. That's very true. In sitting with this myself, of course, one could go straight to the material and think there may be opportunities that are financially rewarding for some, particularly. It depends on how it's going to interact with your chart, personal chart. But for me, Taurus is, it's beautiful in its simplicity. It's beautiful in its grounding and embodying in the real world. It's beautiful in its potential to strengthen whatever that raw life impulse is that is Aries, the first sign of the zodiac. Here with Taurus, something takes form and it grows stronger. And if you attach the Taurian, uh, well, the concepts we've just described as being attached to Taurus, to also the second house of the birth chart, for me, that brings in the potential of exploring opportunities that are uplifting, in particular for one's self-esteem and valuing what you do and having an opportunity to become stronger in a direction that is one that you truly value and is true for you. That's my thought. I know I've read, respected astrologers who very clearly point out that this could be opportunities to do with the material world and wealth and possessions and money. But when I'm working with the second house of the birth chart, which has its Taurian connotations, always at a deeper level, it's beyond material resources. It's about self-esteem, self-value, and personal strength to stick at what you've begun. So that's my thought on the potential manifestation there.
Yeah, thinking about how earth and spirit are so connected. We connect to spirit through our senses, and anything
Mm.
material also has a vibration.
Mm.
And so it's really not possible to separate in that sense. So,
Mm.
yeah, I love what you're saying about self esteem and that potential lift coming up, lifting you up to see that you're more than your own story around yourself. And I mean, it's also often shame holding one back, isn't it?
Yeah, almost every time. And, with Scorpio energy and Pluto energy, this is part of the collective's discovery, I suppose, particularly since Pluto became part of the pantheon of astrological um, symbols. And even the intense nature of life events, at least in the West at that time around 1930, with the Depression and Freud's ideas being expressed through the culture and the triggering of enormous, dangerous dictatorships in Europe that eventually led to war. And there's these power themes, these power issues that I think we are now, humanity, ready to explore in ways that perhaps we haven't been able to be so conscious of before. And perhaps the biggest of those is on a psychological and internal level is shame that I've encountered within myself, but also with working with many clients over the years. So the Taurian journey keeps life very simple as compared to all those deep, dark psychological depths that we necessarily need to encounter. It comes back to the simple. And I'm wondering, even if something simple like body work um, could be an entree energy.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, even though I'm yet to actually walk through the door, how I might do that personally for me too. And when I'm teaching about Taurus energy and the second house, I always offer this symbol of the tree. And here with Aries, we've had the bursting out of life. Here is life, just this instinct for life where the seed just germinates and bursts out of the husk and fights its way through the earth towards the light without consciousness, but on the basis of pure instinct. Yet when that happens, it's still incredibly vulnerable. The next step in the process is to put down roots, it's to grow a trunk, it's to spread branches, it's to become solid and stable in a way that all the storms that come along do not snuff out what has begun. So I'm speaking very metaphorically here, but I think that's the way I like to approach astrology. I don't like to approach astrology in the light of offering this will happen, these events will,
No.
they must. We can have a good guess, but I always feel that offering the metaphor, exploring somebody's personal experience, what their own soul is intuiting around this is the direction of how something is wanting to manifest through each person or individual.
Yeah, it's very helpful with your metaphors. I just want to validate that. It's very helpful because I get images in my mind and thinking about what does it mean for me, and yeah. So that is very helpful. Yeah. So you are saying that it's about finding, well, stability is a Taurus word, reliability, and the strong roots, and and then Uranus is there, right? And so it's like yes, and then also the higher perspective.
It's got to be in the direction that's new, that's not been done before. It's being called to change, to move in that Taurian direction. That's how I bring the two together, because they do seem antithetical, don't they? I mean, Uranus is often very intellectual, and sudden and disruptive. And what I'm talking about is very earthy and this slow process of growth and the restoration of self-esteem that we've mentioned, the healing of shame, the strengthening of one in one's body, in one's life, in one's whatever, wherever this is happening in the chart. For me, it's in my first house. Where is it for you?
It's in my 10th house.
Aha!
So it's like you were born with, you have it so much in your own identity, what I'm striving towards. Can you say it like that, just in rough terms?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. I would definitely, if I were you, I would definitely be looking to sudden connections, inspirations, callings, opportunities that were to do with your career. And if this is your passion and this is your career, it's going to have something to do with this. I'm not sure if those have presented themselves yet, but I
They
would
have not.
encourage you.
And so I'm really opening up for miracles for sure. And and then the other side of it is when you do have a lot of Scorpio that I do in my South Node and Pluto, then it's important to not reach out desperately. Do you know what I mean? Because that's my tendency is like, yes, I want it now. What is it? Right? So I'm working with the Pisces planets as well of letting go, opening up and being curious to see what is those
Yeah.
opportunities. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, from my perspective, what you are doing is you're connecting on an international level, right?
Yes.
Not just with myself, but with a wide variety of people.
I'm doing that.
Um, yeah, you're networking. You're taking this knowledge to a higher level
Yeah.
and bringing all of us together on a larger stage. You're bringing together the combination of astrology and self-discovery and therapy, working therapeutically with your pain, your issues, personal development and growth. This has got to be the direction this is all heading in.
Yes. Yeah.
And when I was very young and first got into this, of course, I was extremely influenced by the greats that did come from the background of Jungian analysis, as Liz Green, for example.
Yeah.
I'm sure many of the people listening to this who know astrology know of her. So there were these profound figures, and I'd studied some psychology before I actually fell over that and learned there was this connection. And that was it for me. It just, for my own journey, made such extraordinary sense. Having said that, I think I've still felt in all the years that I've been doing this that there is this distinction still in place, that astrology is kind of, bit oogie boogie, a bit sort of strange,
Yeah.
associated perhaps with star sign columns in
Yes.
newspapers and
For sure.
what's going to happen this week and what your favorite colors would be and all this sort of stuff, which, you and myself appreciate as being very slight, superficial, unhelpful as
Yeah.
compared to the incredibly complex, profound riches in a
Yes.
birth chart and these deep learnings. So I'm so excited that there's someone like yourself doing this, right? Bringing this all together. And I'm now getting old. I'm in my mid 60s, and I'd really like to see people and some of my students. One of my students last year is a wonderful and very experienced psychologist who wants to work with this and hence the learning with me. And I would love to, by the time my twig falls off the branch. Is that another metaphor that's not going to work? I'm not sure. I'd love to see these schools of knowledge come together in ways that are mutually respectful rather than one is considered part of mainstream healing and knowledge, and the other is still considered strange and oddball and a bit ridiculous. So
Thank you so
I
much
think
for
it's
saying
fantastic.
that. Yeah. No, it is such an important topic, and I encounter it often because here in Denmark I also interview people and who are also people who don't have a spiritual background at all, and so it does come off very strange. And I just recently, a few days ago, had a conversation with someone about. She was a specialist in child-adult relationships, and we're talking about a new way of relating, and very, very interesting. And she was open for astrology. I don't think you agreed to an interview with me if you're completely closed, right? But every time we mentioned something about astrology, we both were laughing. And I only noticed it on listening to the conversation afterwards. And I was like, I need to stop laughing. I mean, they can laugh, but I need to stop laughing about this. But I think it happens because it's against the social norm. So for me to suggest, oh, astrology, I think that should be in the schools or something, then it's laughable because it's so far from where we are. But yeah, to see what I mean,
I do.
yeah,
I do. What a wonderful, meaningful experience for you, because it's afforded you that self-discovery,
yeah,
that sort of cooperating with the diminishment of your worldview, these esteemed schools of knowledge that you're bringing together, that many of us are bringing together, um, is absolutely unkind to your own soul.
yeah,
So, yes, a
yeah.
beautiful moment for you. And I know you won't laugh again, except when you've said something really funny.
Exactly. I need to really be curious, what is this laughter about? It is sometimes we laugh when we feel uncomfortable, and so just
Mm,
being aware of what I don't want it to be, because astrology is not serious to me, because it really is. I guess it's,
mm,
do you know the feeling? I guess it's because you're also seeing it a little bit from the other person's perspective, and then it becomes,
mm,
yeah, it becomes
mm.
strange in other people's eyes. But we need to be serious about it ourselves. Yeah.
You know what I've found with working with clients, and I know that's not just having a chat about what you do with whoever you come across, but with working with clients, I suppose, given the deep Scorpio energy in my chart and my potential, one of the things that I can do and often do, if my client is open to the possibility and is seeking a depth approach, is to talk about family of origin issues that are so profound in the chart, as you would appreciate. And as soon as we begin to explore those themes and issues and those events in those early life experiences that shape or give an early shape to some of these archetypal patterns, that eventually, as we grow older, are very restrictive or even painful and less than helpful, and hence we encounter challenge, psychological challenge, and stress and difficulty and unhappiness, and then we take ourselves off to therapy and we begin to see, aha, here are these patterns. And I can look at this differently. I can make different choices around them. I can actually see how they're attached to these early life experiences that were so necessary at the time. I had no power in situations that I was in at that time. I had to believe this. I had to respond in that way, but I've
Yeah.
outgrown it. So
Yes.
with a client, with astrology, and you go straight there with astrology as your tool, that's where the scales fall off the eyes. That's where somebody knows that they're dealing with a very, very powerful tool of self-discovery that is quite miraculous and deeply important. So I find, I don't know about yourself, you probably find exactly the same, but I find that that's what keeps me going.
Yeah.
It's that those encounters with clients, getting into deep, helpful material, even in the first session. Um, it's serious stuff. It's terrific stuff. It's breakthrough stuff with Uranus. It's deep psychological material with Pluto, even if we're uncovering that which is painful and problematic. It's spiritually uplifting because there is meaning, there is connection, there is something inherently tying all of this together, this pattern that we were born with, these experiences that we've had, and here we are in this moment, finding meaning around all of that. So that to me is what I find so rewarding. And the teaching piece, I don't know if you've thought about teaching yourself as something to do with this 10th house opportunity, planting a seed.
Thank you.
But that's incredibly rewarding also, because generally you are attracting people who have a more metaphysical worldview, who may be psychologically savvy, who are interested in self-discovery. And that's a happy place for people like us to be. But, if you're speaking to people who need to be convinced because
Exactly.
you can tell them something that they didn't know, I had an amazing conversation many years ago. I was living in an interesting household in San Francisco where people were doing PhDs in gerontology, which is the science of aging.
Oh,
And so I would sit up late at night having amazing conversations about their discoveries in terms of medical discoveries, the nature of physics. We'd be talking about how worlds were dying in the moments that we were actually talking about our stuff. And it was almost like the opportunity for someone with a deep and profound scientific worldview to challenge me. How do you know? How do you know? And I said, look, if I was going to explore my own chart and share with you something that I'd learned about me through inquiry using my own chart as a tool, you could hold me to account for expressing some sort of bias, for seeing things the way I want to see them because it satisfies my need to see my patterns in a certain way. What that doesn't explain, however, is how many people I've done sessions with over the years who time after time after time have the scales fall off their eyes, who deeply resonate with my offerings, who feel completely unveiled.
yeah.
That's not once, that's not 10 times, that's just about, well, it is every time, as
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So
That's amazing.
yeah, that
Um,
was my my suggestion to him. And as a scientist, he completely understood and got that. That's the evidence for the theory.
yeah. Yeah. Okay, we have so many things to say, so little time. So we are on our closing thoughts here, and just I feel like it's very relevant what you're just talking about, because it's also very hopeful with Uranus and Jupiter in Taurus, that
Mm,
what is normal. So that's also a side of Taurus. This is our foundation,
mm,
can be now challenged and hopefully open up what we consider to be normal.
I love the way you've made those connections from everything we've been discussing. And perhaps, particularly for yourself, with this 10th house, beautiful Jupiter Uranus conjunction, this is part of the opportunity. This is seeing things at last in this way. Um, this is a personal insight that's deeply liberating and deeply respectful of what you do. I'm sure that won't be the only manifestation of it, but I think already you're feeling it. It's coming through in this
I'm so
conversation.
feeling the calling anyway to just, and I really want the form to, I want the form to follow the energy, and I believe that, right? So that's why I'm hoping
Mm,
it can show up, and I believe that there's a lot of deep inner work sometimes in the way of that. Yeah. So
mm, mm, mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing you really feeling into the Taurian tone of this opportunity. It has to embody
Yes.
something
Yeah.
practical. Yes.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm,
Because Taurus is also our
mm,
survival, right? And that's why there's been different theories, and we are not getting into that obviously with the time we have lived here, about what it is on a collective level, more in terms of yeah, politics and and all of that, right? That's the
Aha. Oh
whole
my
other. But
goodness.
when it is about survival,
That is
yeah,
another
yeah.
conversation.
But
Yeah. Look, I've actually, if I could just add this, because that's just fascinating what you've suggested. We are perhaps at the beginning of the age of Aquarius. Uranus rules Aquarius. There's been a lot going on that's been very strong with Uranus over the last few years, with the square to Pluto and then the square to Saturn, the challenges in recent years. I've done a lot of thinking and researching, particularly around that Saturn Uranus square that's just finished up very recently, and its inclination towards extremism and social um, crisis. So, with your suggestion right now, just a little hint as we finish off that there is also a larger theme at play here beyond the
yes,
personal. Is this an opportunity where more progressive social movements, political movements finally have their moment after so much challenge?
yes,
I will pray for
yes,
that.
yeah, yeah, and yeah. So social movement is Uranus, and hopefully reaching into something higher, right? Something,
Yeah. And more positive, more uplifted, more
yeah,
hopeful. That's a huge word that's connected to Jupiter
yes,
for me. More hope at last. I mean, you're in Europe. You're more intimately engaged with some of the issues concerning European politics. But it just seems like there's just a couple of little positive stories that are happening that I wondered, had curiosity around as to whether suddenly there's more social change being felt as a real
yes,
possibility again, where there's been so much distress. And there still, of course, are very,
of
very
course,
grim events happening in the world and dangerous players and actors. But at the same time, this is new. You know, Uranus has been under a
yeah,
lot of pressure. Pluto's gone into Aquarius. It's going to have to go deep and challenge us. You know, that's going into that whole story of the Aquarian age with Pluto there for the next 20 years. It's going to have to confront issues that you were talking about,
yeah,
like shame, and resentment and challenge. So I think that this is a necessary uplifted episode. And I would like to think my view of transits as they progress is they each build on each other.
yeah,
And
yeah,
from the challenges that we've experienced that was so profound, all the pandemic, it's the conspiracy theories, the horrendous um, challenges of dictatorial figures and now wars, and we've had some really painful stuff to have to look at. Um, Yet, is this a moment where we can finally still connect with a sense of positivity around that journey?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I believe so, and I believe we need to hold on to the positive perspective, and Jupiter is reminding us of that. We do need it, even though, of course, that can also, like you were mentioning, that of course that can also be too much of something, too much excess. But
And one of
in
the
general,
one of
where
the
the energy,
one of the other things, just to quickly finish on, is that Uranus
yeah,
is moving towards a beautiful combination with Saturn and Neptune and Pluto over this next few years. It's been under so much pressure, hasn't it? So much pressure for the
yeah,
last few years. Very, very painful. Um, very scary in some ways. So perhaps this is our turning point. this beautiful opportunity here with Jupiter and Uranus coming together. Finally, it's been building for a while, and this next several months manifesting in beneficial change, positive change, hopeful change, holding to higher values.
Yeah.
That
Holding to higher values.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that brings in the Taurus again, doesn't it? That is
Yeah. Yeah.
readying us for this lovely interaction between all those outer planets that will be the stuff of another conversation, perhaps between us at some point in the
Yes.
future.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Deborah Muffet. Do I even say your name correct?
Yes, you do. Thank you. Yes, you
Oh, great. Deborah Muffet. Okay, so it's exactly how it's spelled. Great.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. I can't believe how well articulate you are. That's just I think it's my inner podcaster. It's also my outer. Is I am a podcaster who likes that you're so articulate. So that's so wonderful to listen to, and I also feel really hopeful about what's coming up.
It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you and to make this connection. And I actually contemplated how interesting it was that you and I should hook up under the influence of this beautiful and uplifted energy pattern. So I'm
It's
trusting
very
this will
special.
be a special connection and we'll meet again.
Yeah. Thank you so much.